Hi, in this video I'm going to be showing you how to set up a NetSuite export using Integrator.io. First thing, like all exports, we need to set up the name of the export, and then we want to select which application we're pulling data from. So in this case, we're going to be pulling data from NetSuite. Next, we have to either select an existing connection from the dropdown or create a new connection. In this case, I'm going to be using an existing connection I've already set up for this NetSuite account. The next option is selecting if we want to do either a real-time export or a scheduled export. A real-time export will have NetSuite send the record data to Integrator.io when the record is either created, edited, or deleted. A scheduled export will run a NetSuite save search to fetch data based off a schedule inside Integrator.io. So first we're going to talk about the real-time export. At this point, we see a list of record types that are available within this NetSuite account. This list is based off of the connection that is set up on this integration flow and its role within that NetSuite account. If you do not see a record type that you want to export in this list, you can refresh this list by hitting this refresh icon. This will send a call out to NetSuite to gather all the metadata for that NetSuite account. And if you are working with a custom record type that you just create, you would have to refresh that list. If it is a standard record type, you should check the permissions on your role to make sure that your role has access to it. Otherwise, it will not show up in this list. First, we want to select which record type we're dealing with, and then we can select which execution context that will trigger the flow. So the defaults are user interface and web store. This means that whenever somebody is actually within NetSuite, edits the record, or somebody places an order for it through the web store, it would trigger the flow. Other options here are web services, workflow, user event, scheduled data flows, map reduce operations. These are all different execution contexts that you can select to trigger the data flow as well. Then we have the execution type. So what type of action is actually happening to this record that would trigger the flow. So when they're created, edited, deleted, inline edits such as updating a field on a saved search result, records being approved, canceled, and so forth. And then we get to select which sublists on this record we want to export. So if we don't select any sublists, only the header level information of the record would be sent to Integrator.io. But usually we want to include some sublists, such as items on a sales order. We may also want payments or shipments. We can also define qualification criteria for which sales orders we want to send over by selecting corresponding fields on the sales order. So such as authorization ID, and say is not empty. In this case, it would only send over sales orders that have an authorization ID. We can also set multiple criteria by hitting the plus icon and remove criteria by hitting the minus icon. And you can also select and or operations from this list as well. At the bottom, we'll also see sample data, which contains the metadata that would be sent from NetSuite to Integrator.io. We also have an option at the bottom, which is called Reload Record Before Export. This is used for some fields that don't immediately get set within the NetSuite database, and the record has to be loaded again. Examples of this would be the line ID on sales order line items. If we were going to save this, we would hit next, and that would take us to the next step of our integration. But I want to show the scheduled execution type next. So here we get to select which API we want to use with NetSuite. The first option is RESTlet, which is a script that is installed with the Integrator.io bundle for NetSuite. This is the preferred method because we have advanced features there that allow for things such as sales order to item fulfillment transformations, injecting custom code if needed, instead of just using the basic SweetTalk SOAP API, which is the web services option. Typically, the RESTlet is also going to be faster than the web service application as well. When we select this, we will get that same record type option where we can select what type of record we're trying to export out of NetSuite, and then we would want to select which save search we want to do. So if your search is a public save search, it will show up on this list. If it was just recently created, you may have to refresh the list here. If it is not a public save search, you would select private and you would put in the script ID for that save search. In this case, I'm going to be using a public one, which is this save search, workshop sales orders save search within NetSuite. And here, I'm going to select this from my list. And this will actually run that save search inside NetSuite to make sure first it's valid and to get sample data of what is going to be pulled from NetSuite. Then we select our export type. We have 4 options here. All will export all the save search results. Delta allows us to select a date field that's on the record type that we selected above, and it will only pull records that have a date in that field that is greater than the last time the sync ran. We can select once, where we could select a Boolean field, and this will dynamically add a filter into that save search where this field is not checked. And then once we pull that record out of NetSuite, Integrator.io will go back and check that checkbox on that record so it doesn't get synced again. Last option is test, which only grabs the first save search result. And this is useful for when you're trying to test the integration to make sure you don't send more data than you want to. So in this case, I'm selecting all. And then we have the skip grouping option. So in NetSuite Save Searches, if I run this, we'll see that since I'm pulling line level information from the Save Search, we would get multiple lines for the same record here. So this one sales order has 2 lines with the same internal ID. That is because there's 2 separate line items on the sales order. So by default, Integrator.io will group records with the same internal ID into a single record instead of exporting them as individual records. You can turn off this setting by hitting the skip grouping section, and that would make each line act as its own record. Now, for the grouping to work, the save search needs to have the results sorted by internal ID. Now, here we get the sample data that is from the save search. All the field names are the same as the label headers for the results of the save search. So you can change the name of these fields by changing the custom label on the save search results inside NetSuite. Now, here we also have 2 additional options such as transformation rules and filter rules. Transformation rules allow you to change the names of individual fields from the export and name them something else on the data that gets sent out of the export. Now, since we have the option of doing that within the Save Search results inside NetSuite, it is recommended that you just do it there. But you do have the power to do it within Integrator.io as well. Filter rules allow you to filter out which records need to pass on from the export into the import, and you can set criteria here within Integrator.io. Now, you also have this capability within NetSuite using the Save Search functionality, and it is recommended that you do it there so that that data is not pulled out of NetSuite in the first place. But for several other exports, these filter rules are quite handy. Next step is page size. So this is how many records are included in a page of information that gets sent onto the import. The default for this is 20 records, and you can overwrite this to be a smaller number, a larger number, to change the performance of the sync.